Well, Brad Scott's out the door, Rhys Shaw has a comfy new chair, and the Kangaroos are ready to enter a new chapter in their club history. But before they do, let's take a look back on their 2019 season. To say the year was polarising for North Melbourne would be a bit of an understatement. Prior to the coaching change, they were playing some of the lousiest football they've played in recent years, and afterwards, some very decent football. After switching from Scott to Shaw, the club rejuvenated what looked like a dead season and gave themselves a glimmer of finals hopes. So to say it was a total failure would probably be doing them a wrong, but to say it was a success would also not be correct at all. Overall, they managed a 12th place finish with a 10-12 record and a percentage of 99.5. Not bad for a side with more losses than wins. Really, North had a bit of everything going on this year, so without further delay, let's get into their review. Prior to the year kicking off, North were touted by many to slide down the ladder, which was a bit of a funny prediction given that they'd just come off this amazing season where they'd actually finished 9th and given finals a shake, so progression would usually dictate that they'd go into the 8. But most punters had them sliding down. Many thought 2018 was an overachievement, and to be honest, they didn't add anything in the off-season that really inspired much, missing out on Andrew Gaff, and once they had missed out on him, it was a matter of adding the likes of Aaron Hall, Jasper Pittard and Jared Polek, which, let's be honest, doesn't exactly move the needle, does it? I guess in a sense, North kind of ended up where people thought that they would, in 12th place with that 10-12 record, but the way they got there was totally different from how anyone thought they could possibly reach that point. They couldn't possibly have been off to a worse start, travelling to Perth and getting absolutely smacked by my Freo boys to the tune of 82 points and having an absolute nightmare here at Optus Stadium. It was probably one of the more pathetic efforts that were dished up from any team over the course of the year, and it put them on a 0-3 start, which sort of just set the tone for how they were going to go in the early weeks of the year. Thankfully, they broke their duck in round 4 when Shaun Higgins gathered 30 touches and Ben Brown kicked 4 goals to see them past the Crows, but it was by no means a turning point in the year, and the losses sort of continued to flicker in and out. By round 8, they'd registered just 2 victories for the year, and round 9 was the telling point of the season, with a loss to Sydney pushing them over the edge and forcing the move away from Brad Scott as their head coach. The Friday after the loss, just 2 days before they were supposed to play Brisbane in an AFL game of football, the reports surfaced that they were ready to depart from Scott. The upcoming match against the Bulldogs would be his last, and it was an extremely emotional time, particularly for the players who were extremely attached to Brad Scott. But at the very least, it was a successful end to Scott's career, as North fired on all cylinders, rampaging in the first 3 quarters of the game before fending off a Bulldogs fight back to take home what was a pretty inspirational win for the club and desperately needed for the club. From there, it was a matter of enter Rhys Shaw. The caretaker coach took over with immediate impact. He freed up guys like Jack Zeeble, who had been stuck in some forward line prison, to return to the midfield. He played much better football, and they seemed to just get on a roll from there. Shaw also seemed to get the most out of youngsters like Jai Simpkin, who went on to have a really good year. So it was a plus on many fronts putting him into the job. It wasn't all rosy, but wins over Richmond, Collingwood, Port Adelaide, and finally a 5-point win over the Demons to end their season at least gave North fans a glimmer of hope as they enter what looms as a bit of a weird off-season for the club. No doubt North fans are going to look back on their season and think of the bright side. I mean, 10 wins ain't really that bad. But there were still 12 losses and some really ugly football played in amongst it. To be blunt, statistically, the Roos just stunk. I mean, how in the hell are you ever supposed to control a game when you rank last in kicks, marks, and tackles? It's just not good enough, and it's not going to get the job done in any level of football. They also had their woes extracting the ball from the clearance, which is just not what you want when your defense isn't actually holding up that well and you're coughing up a fair amount of points. Those factors led them to their share of losses and were inevitably what put them on the path at the start of the season that sort of derailed things, but they did pick it up in the later stages. Another player whose intent didn't waver was Ben Cunnington, who led them through those really dark times at the start of the season and continued to play good footy as things got better. They also had some young kids pop out, like Cam Zurhaar and Tarrant Thomas, who look like real finds that could help them as Rhys Shaw starts his permanent coaching tenure with the Roos. Oh yeah, and someone else played better as well. Oh yeah, Ben Brown still kicks 64 goals. So they've still got that forward presence and they'll still continue to benefit from his work. If you mix all of those factors with the fact that they're about to get a full pre-season under coach Rhys Shaw, there's reason to believe that North could be pretty good next year. But there's also a case to be made that they'll slide down the ladder again. So how do they take that step forward? And what do they need to add to their list next year? Well, the retirement of Scott Thompson doesn't exactly help them. He's been a reliable defender for him for years now, and they're going to have to go out and find someone to replace him and not pile the entire load on the shoulders of Robbie Tarrant. At the time of filming this, there's also rumours that Shaun Higgins may want out, which could leave them thin in the midfield. So how do they address these holes? I guess it's a pretty tough question given that North have basically whiffed on nearly every single player that they've ever wanted in free agency. So do they go to the draft, or do they maybe look to make a trade? Or do they continue to try their luck in the free agent pool and hope that they might land the player that they're after? For me, particularly in terms of the midfield stocks, I think they need to lean on the young talent that they've already got. Simpkin had a pretty good year, and Taron Thomas looks like a piece that'll develop well. Cam Zurhaar was also very good for them, and hopefully Luke Davies-Uniacke can take another step forward in his development. Also, Ben Brown remains just 26 years of age, so you've got plenty of good football ahead of him too. So where exactly will North Melbourne be next year? Are they going to be finals contenders, middle of the pack, cellar dwellers? You could make a case for just about every single aspect, given on how Rhys Shaw's going to go full-time in the job. But look away, Roos fans, because I actually think you're going to slide down the ladder a little bit more. Don't get me wrong, I like the quality of the young players you've got coming through. I think you've got some really good pieces, but it's quantity that worries me. I don't think you've got enough coming through the ranks that are going to stock you up for the next premiership push. For me, depth is the issue, and I worry that North are just a few injuries away from a catastrophe. But hey, if you watch our weekly show Footy Rivals and follow our tips, you probably know that I've got my fair share of things wrong in the past, and maybe I'm wrong about this one. Who knows? So with all of that said and done, that's a wrap on my analysis for North Melbourne's rollercoaster that was 2019. This was, without doubt, the hardest review that I've had to do since we started this process, just for the fact that they changed so much throughout the season. Next up, Joel takes you through his beloved Adelaide Crows, which should be an awesome watch given he's the most pessimistic fan that I've ever come across. Outside of that, you can still catch our weekly Thursday night show Footy Rivals, where Ryan and myself dissect the ins and outs of the AFL's news week while looking ahead to upcoming finals matches. If you like this video, please subscribe to the AFL Access channel and leave a big thumbs up. You can also join our Discord server and drop me a line in the comments. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you next time to review the first of our finals contenders that exited the season, the Bombers. Cheers. So how do they take that step? But look away, Roos fans, because unfortunately, that's not a word.